7 seconds of silence. Well, hello there, Laura. How are you today?
I am fantastic. How are you, Nick?
I am great. I've been so excited for this. And the one thing that's been on my mind is, Laura, what is the question of the day? The first 2 minutes when everybody's joining.
Ooh, I would like to ask people if their companies are investing or interested in investing in social selling.
Okay, everyone. Question of the day in the comments. Is your company investing in social? Whether
Yes.
at a company level or even just giving you the opportunity to post what you want.
That would be fantastic.
So, Laura, why did we partner to do this? What is this all about?
It's about fun. No, to be honest with you, it didn't start there. It started in social selling. So Nick and I, we met in this beautiful universe of LinkedIn connections. And that's how it becomes so beautiful that you meet people you might never have met in your life before in various places in the world. And at the same time, you're doing good deeds for your company, building up the demand, and meeting fantastic people just like Nick. So we started to do it at the same time, also to build a platform for people to understand how other companies are doing this. Well, you might be following some of them, liking some of the posts, but how are they actually doing it? Is it working? Where did they start to kind of build out a more or less almost a book of people who do it right, companies that do it right. That's why it's an enterprise of social. We're all social, but our companies investing into that. That's what we're here for. What do you think, Nick? Why did we start this?
Honestly, I was so blown away with Dream Data and how your team start came out of nowhere. Like you built it so fast. But the one thing that you guys did that really blew me away is you worked as a team and you tested content and you were actually social. And like there was the post that Chris Walker commented on, and you guys could have grabbed all those leads and spam the heck out of them. But you built a community around yourselves and really own that as a company. And I think like it's amazing. Like you guys did the challenge the other day about going from 8,000 followers to 10. How many people could do that in less than 24 hours? Less like it's like 12 hours or less. But it's because you built such a strong brand around yourself, and it just blew me away. But I don't think we talk enough about this. I don't think we look at these companies and look at it through a lens that's kind of that modern approach. And that's why I'm so excited to look at the companies like Spekit that are really doing this. And let's get out of the gray area and let's be more clear about what it actually looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the important and interesting part of it is how people join their own personal brands with the company's brand itself. We're going to chat about that as well because we're going to have Zoe on stage, and she is a master of being so personal. So it
Mhm.
feels like we know her. Never met her. It feels like we do know her, and we know where she's working at. So it's kind of the personal approach, and how do you join it with the full company approach as well? It's like so companies start popping out of nowhere, just like Dream Data did for you. I'm so happy it did pop out for you, Nick.
Yeah. It we're never gonna look back, but I think it's the time. What do you think? Should we bring Zoe on?
I think so. You
Do
ready,
it.
Zoe?
Yep. Hi.
Hey,
Thanks for having me.
thanks for
Oh,
joining us, and thank you for being you on social media. And in the pre-show, you actually brought something up that I would love for you to share. The biggest compliment you had ever received.
Oh, yeah. So about 2 weeks ago, I went to Thursday Night Sales Hard No Conference in Florida, and I got to meet a lot of people that I have only been sort of friends with on the internet and through LinkedIn and through personal brand. And I got to meet a friend of mine who I'd been chatting with over LinkedIn DMs for a year. And he gave me the biggest hug and we chatted for a little bit. And as we parted ways for the evening, he looked at me and he said, Zoe, thank you so much for being exactly who I thought you were. And it just felt like the biggest
Wow.
compliment that like I'm not putting on some big facade. Like I really make an effort not to pretend like I know more than I do, or not to be somebody that I'm not online, because that doesn't really benefit anyone. But hearing that from him was just like a huge compliment. I hope that anyone who meets me in person after having engaged with me online feels that way.
That
Wow.
that was one of the reasons that you hit my radar is with so many people were like studying the gurus or the influencers to go and figure out how to post, what the formatting was, what were like the on trend things to say. You stuck out. You were being you. You were being vulnerable. You were being transparent. You were being honest. And I felt like, unlike a lot of people, every single post, I got to know you. And I feel like you're one of the few people that I could go have a conversation with meeting in person and just carry it just from how you post, even though we haven't really talked that much in the DMs.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's definitely the goal. And I think it's a balance, right? Like, I actually think I have a lot of opportunity to grow and being more strategic and offering like really practical, tactical advice to people. I think I'm really thoughtful about how often I write about something personal, or how often I write about something Spekit related, or how often I write about something like SDR strategy. But I think I could do a better job finding that balance and making sure that I'm really delivering value. Because at the end of the day, like, me talking about my personal life all day, every day, like, LinkedIn might as well be Facebook. So there's definitely a balance to strike there. And I think that the platform could really benefit from. It's unfortunate. Like, I understand the algorithm. I know how to not game it, but I know what people want to see and how to like break out my post line by line. It's unfortunate because a lot of people do know how to do that and don't have anything to say. And yet they have these big followings and they're just putting content out there, and it's kind of like whatever, like this doesn't really matter. And then there's people in my network who don't have big followings who I know have a ton of value to deliver, and they get discouraged because it's like, oh, no one really like engages with my content, even if it's like very tactical, very practical, very useful advice. So I think there's something that needs to shift on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to kind of bridge the gap between like how do I make engaging content that also matters and isn't just like fluffy nonsense.
Fantastic. Zoe, can we ask you, where did you start with social selling? How did it all start, all in all?
Yeah, so the very first post I wrote that got any kind of engagement was I was an SDR, and I had just gone to my very first show ever. So it was 2 years ago. It was right before the pandemic hit. And a VP of sales came up and said something like, not like inappropriate, but he was just talking down to me. And he was like calling me sweetheart and like discrediting what I was like there to do. Like, he was just being really condescending. And so I wrote this open letter. I didn't name him or anything like that. I just wrote this open letter of like, dear VP at said conference, this is why what you said hurt my feelings, and here's how you could have done it better. And it like blew up, and I got a ton of DMs from other women in sales who were like, I have had this exact same conversation, or I've had this exact same experience, and like, I wish I had said what you did, or I like blah blah blah, you know. And so it was this like moment where I was like, oh, I'm not alone in my experience, and also there's something to be learned from these other people on this platform. I followed Morgan Ingram and Sarah Brazier really, really closely. And like, I would credit most of my success as an SDR to like tips they were putting out for being a good SDR, because at the time we were a brand new outbound team. I didn't really know what I was doing. We didn't have any enablement. We didn't have a lot of resources. So we were all just kind of like throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what stuck. And I would adopt things like Morgan Ingram taught me the reverse voicemail. I can't tell you how many meetings I booked with that tip. And that was all on LinkedIn. So now, like, flash forward 2 years, I'm now posting every day. It didn't happen overnight, but I'm trying to pay that forward a little bit, create a space where people can feel like they can relate to someone, where somebody understands their experience, but also where I'm offering hopefully helpful, practical, tactical advice that they can implement in their day to day and be better at their jobs.
Amazing. One of the big questions that I get, Zoe, with this and like being that your authentic self is, well, I can't because of my manager. I can't because of leadership. They won't let me be me. Like I have to be company only. they kind of own my feed. What did that look like with Spekit when you started?
Yeah, so when I started at Spekit, Melanie Fillet, our CEO, and I had like a good long chat over the phone just about personal brand and like what that means and how do you carry a personal brand and a professional brand hand in hand and where do you stand in the middle? And I think it is a balance because at the end of the day, like I'm Zoe Hartsfield, I'm not Spekit, but there's no denying that people look at me and then associate me with Spekit or think Spekit. I would not say I'm the loudest voice at Spekit. I do think I'm one of them though. And so there's a responsibility there. And with great power comes great responsibility, whatever you want to call it. But I think you could look at it as like, oh, I can't say everything that I want to say, or you can look at it as an opportunity. Like I've never felt censored by my team. I've never felt like they told me like you can't say this. But it does make me like double check, like take that litmus test of like what do I want to say, and is this the right platform to say it? And does this benefit what I am trying to do personally and professionally? And because I work at Spekit, what I'm trying to do professionally directly correlates to Spekit. And I'm trying to grow brand awareness. I'm trying to grow their following. I'm trying to get demos for my BDRs. And so when I think about that, it makes it really easy to say yes or no to content
Mhm.
for myself, or maybe say like, maybe this should like live on Twitter or something else. But I think it's just asking yourself that question of like, what is your why? What is your goal for being on this platform? And for me, it's to amplify whatever brand I work for, and that's Spekit today. And it honestly is like really fun and an interesting challenge to think of ways to like be a real person, but also like generate demand on LinkedIn. And yeah, it's been working. It's been cool.
That's very cool. A question in terms of you have been an SDR, so you have
Mhm,
been like revenue responsible, and now
mhm.
you are posting personal stories. And now I'm thinking more about the strategy of Spekit. Do you feel that a part of the social selling is a like social selling is a part of Spekit's strategy? And how do you fit in? Are you asked to fit in? Are you just doing your own thing and it's just working?
Yeah, well, when James inevitably comes on, I'm sure he can speak to this, but we have a one team, one pipe mentality. So marketing is just as responsible for pipeline as business development. So I'm always thinking about pipeline. How is everything I'm doing affecting our pipeline? How am I supporting our business development and sales teams? How am I supporting our CS teams? Community is sort of this interesting cross-functional role anyway, where I get to partner with all of the different business functions. But yeah, I'm still would consider myself revenue responsible or like revenue adjacent. And
Mhm.
one thing we did, and one thing I continue to do, is I created a social selling playbook and a social selling training that I delivered to all of our BDRs and AEs, because it's not super helpful if it's just one person like from your team engaging on LinkedIn. It's way more impactful, and you probably both know this, but like a brand page gets terrible reach on LinkedIn because the algorithm does not favor brands, it favors individual creators. They're talking about the creator economy. So there is a benefit to having individuals on the platform, because 5 team members posting in a day is going to get 10x the reach of my one company post, even if the company has a bigger following. And that's just because of the way that the algorithm works. So by equipping your individual employees to be brand ambassadors, you're going to get a lot better brand awareness. You're going to get a lot better engagement across the board. I mean, that's the playbook we ran for our Series B announcement. We painted LinkedIn pink for a day by getting everybody excited and posting about it. And so I think the strategy for Spekit, and it's still evolving, like I just got here, I don't want to claim to be an expert, is equip salespeople and anyone else at the company who wants to be like a banner person for Spekit and to be a brand ambassador, so that when they post, you think Spekit. When I post, people think Spekit. I want when Morgan Buchanan posts, when Reese Baba posts, when Ryan McNeese posts, I want people to think, oh, that's Spekit. Oh, that's Spekit. And when people see those names, that they get excited because they know who we are and what we stand for. And that's really the goal there.
I was thinking, Laura, we had a really good question from Roman here. I was thinking we'd pull it up because
Yep,
I get this a
let's
lot
do
of the
that.
time from sellers. They're like, yeah, like I started in this other industry. I built this following, how do I stay authentic to my brand or to myself without just doing this pitch? So how do I amplify my company's voice and demand through my own personal brand, 5K plus now, if my brand is built on something completely different?
That's a good question. So I would say I went through this with Spekit a little bit, because I originally, when I started building my personal brand, yes, shout out Ryan McNeese. Sorry, I saw that in the comments. When I started building my personal brand, I worked for a video email company. So I was talking about video strategy, and that was how I built my following. And then I moved to more of like a revenue based, like a seller's tool. It made Salesforce easier. And so then I was talking to salespeople specifically. And now I work in enablement, which is just like another slight pivot. So the way that I've done it is, how can you take what you do and like what you are good at and your expertise and the problem your company solves for? So not talking about the product itself, not feature dumping, like take that out of the equation. What's the problem you solve? And can you speak to that problem and become an expert and an authority of that problem? Like, I'm not here talking about how just-in-time enablement is like the end-all be-all for everything. Instead, I'm like, what's a problem that an SDR faces today? Can I help solve that? Can I speak to the enablement issue on a whole for like those smaller companies that don't have enablement? And can I be thought of as somebody who knows what they're talking about? Because the end goal isn't for people to be like, oh, Zoe can teach me how to use Spekit. I want them to think, man, we are like starting to build out our enablement team. I don't really know where to start. Is there anyone in my network I could go to ask for help? Oh, Zoe talks about enablement all the time. Like, why don't I DM her and see if I can help? And then for me, it's like a layup to the sales team of just like, why don't you go talk to Ryan McNeese over here? So it's being thoughtful about finding that gap and seeing if you can stand in it in a way that still feels authentic to you. But yeah, like, you don't have to pitch your product or like talk specifically at your audience. Like, it's a conversation. So can you start conversations about the problem that you solve and position yourself as an authority on the subject?
Very beautiful. I think it's fantastic. In terms of the questions, we've got a lot of questions in the chat, Nick. I think, should we park some of them and pick them up a little later, but just take on the questions that are mattering for the conversation right now? How do you want to do it?
Absolutely. Like, we could even go and jump into like some of the questions we're coming up are going to answer a few of those questions. So like the gentleman that just asked about how do you measure, one of the things I wanted to know is, does your content and activities generate inbound? And what are you guys doing to track that? Like, is there like rules to live by?
Yeah, so we have a couple different things in place right now, and I think this will evolve as we evolve as a marketing team. I am not an ops person. I will never claim to be. Thank goodness that we have people on our team smarter than me who are good at that back end stuff. But early days, it was an Excel spreadsheet, and when I had a conversation, I was just jotting it down, who it was, who I handed it to. Now we have, HubSpot forms and landing pages. So when I have an inbound community or LinkedIn lead from a conversation or a post, like, I'll write a post and say, hey, like, if you're an enablement person and you take a demo with one of my BDRs, I will send you like lunch today or whatever. And I got 2 people to reach out to me directly and say, hey, I've been thinking about Spekit for a while. Like, sounds like now's the time to jump on it. And so I was able to like fill out that form. It's now in Salesforce appropriately, and then I hand it over directly to my salesperson to create a better customer experience. And now that's in the pipeline. And so I think we did upwards of like 30 inbound LinkedIn, like community driven opportunities in Q1. So for my first 90 days, that was what we were able to generate. I hope to double that in Q2. We'll see if we do it. But it's a little bit harder when you start expanding out to other reps. So like, we have channels in Slack that I can search to double check and say, like, this is how we share when we book meetings, how we book the meetings. And our reps are really good at telling the story of how they booked it. So I think like I can search that channel and double check, like, oh, this came through LinkedIn, or they got a LinkedIn DM. And so it's also really encouraging to see SDRs and AEs booking meetings off of like tactics and things that we talked about in the social selling training. Like, they sent a thank you video and then they booked a meeting. And I wouldn't take credit for that. Like, that's not me, but it's nice to be able to kind of pencil it in under like, okay, the training and what we're trying to achieve is successful and we're going somewhere with it. So you're not going to get all of the attribution that you want, but it's nice to understand the trends of what's working and what's not so that you can double down on the places where you're seeing success.
I think it's the first time I've ever heard somebody doing it this structured. I mean, you can't capture most of it, what happens on LinkedIn, but this is a tactic that we would like to try out as well. I think it's really cool because this
I'll
is
send
that
it to
kind of,
you. I'll send you the playbook.
yes, please, yes, please. And when talking about sales and yeah, mapping it to revenue itself, I have seen your competition, not a competition, you had a cold calling time out with Spekit where everybody seemed to be doing cold calling and we were almost following it on LinkedIn. That was fantastic. Can you walk us through how you did it and supported your SDR team?
Ooh, so like the cold calling initiative. Are you talking about like our PG Mondays when everybody calls and generates pipeline? Okay.
Yeah.
So I can't take credit for this. This is not my idea. This was, I believe, Andrew Bothwell, who is our SVP of revenue. And basically every single Monday for most of Monday, it is pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. Like we don't take meetings. We don't do internal meetings. I cannot set a meeting for an AE on a Monday because everybody as a team is running full speed towards the same goal. And we're all cold calling and cold emailing and generating pipeline. Now, I don't necessarily participate in that, but I make myself available as I can be to, SDRs and AEs if they say, hey, do you know this person on LinkedIn? Would you help me like craft this outreach, or like, could you read this email or whatever? Like at the end of the day, I am on the marketing team, but like the marketing team is there to support the revenue efforts. And so however we can help or assist, like that's what we're up to. But I mean, shout out to the sales team. Like they have so much hustle and so much grit. And every Monday they come together as a team and they do these call blocks. And I think it's pretty cool because they kind of compete with one another. Like they get broken out into like cohorts and teams. So like who booked the most meetings, who did the most activity, and it's gamified. So it keeps it really exciting and interesting, but also they are generating meetings and they are generating pipeline. And that's what we're trying to do.
Wow. That's a nugget
Love
for
it.
people to learn off as well.
I think
Good
it
one.
actually, I'll bring this back to Roman's question, if you don't mind, Zoe. And this is one I get all the time is like, I don't have time for social selling. Like, I need to make my calls and I need to do my emails. And I'm curious, like, how would you layer this in, or what would be your recommendation if somebody wants to dip their toes in, but do it well?
I would gracefully challenge the you don't have time narrative. I used to say that. I used to say I didn't have time for that. But you'd be amazed what you can get done in a day. And I think it comes down to how efficient are you with your activities and are you time blocking? I used to time block social selling into my day. So 30 minutes in the morning, write a post, go on, comment 5 times on somebody's content, connect with prospects, etc. You have 100 connection requests that you're allowed to use on LinkedIn per week. You should be maxing those out every week to connect with prospects, peers, and potential mentors every single time. So spend 30 minutes doing that. Spend 30 minutes in the afternoon engaging in the comments, conversations, DMing people. And when you time block it out, just like you're time blocking your call blocks, just like you're time blocking your emails, you suddenly realize like, oh, there is enough time in the day for me to spend 30 minutes on this or for me to spend 15 minutes on this. And I think if you spent 15 minutes 3 times a week connecting, commenting, and DMing people, you would see the results you want to see within 3 months.
Amazing. And it's so simple, so bite-sized. What we talk about the LinkedIn in 30, like just start small. But I love it. I love it that you even break it up to different parts of the day. And then, yeah, it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't need to be a full-time job. Add it in, time block it.
Yeah, I mean, like nowadays, I probably spend a lot more time on LinkedIn, but being in community, that's just like a different role. But back when I was an SDR, like I don't think I ever spent more than an hour of my day on LinkedIn, and I still was probably booking by the end, like 30 to 40% of my meetings were booked off of LinkedIn DMs. So it was worthwhile to me. You have to like build up to that. That's not going to happen day one. But putting in that, it's like anything, like you have to invest in something, you have to exercise that muscle, and you're going to get really good and you're going to get really conversational and you're going to understand the moments of opportunity where it's like, now is the time that I reach out to this person. You just posted about this problem that you're having. I think we could solve it. Got a few minutes to chat, kind of a thing.
I love it. Love it so much. I like it's nice when you hear people talk about what they've actually done and how simple it is. And
It's like
yeah,
simple in theory, but like it's definitely, there's an element of you just have to trial and error. Like I definitely fell on my face a couple times or sent a few DMs that didn't land well or sent a video that was never opened. Like you have to understand like people and what they want. Not everybody wants to be spoken to the same way. And so I think it's helpful. And the other thing is, not every single one of your prospects is going to be active on LinkedIn. Like you will not book 100% of your meetings on LinkedIn because not 100% of your prospects are active on there. So it's just like good to remember that this is part of the multi-channel, and it's definitely, you know, it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the end all be all.
Fantastic.
thank you for saying
We
that.
could go, yeah, we could go on forever, and we've got a lot of questions to go through later on as well. But I think it would be also fantastic to hear it from James, if we could add him to our little chat to talk about how does it work out from the marketing side as well.
Thanks, Zoe. We really appreciate you jumping in and giving us all of the information and making it so simple.
Of course, thanks.
Ready? Oh, we gotta fix that. There we go.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
Great.
Very
How
good.
are you?
The internet is working. How's it going?
It is. Chose the worst possible time to stop working, but we got it going.
Happens to the
Fantastic.
best of
James,
us.
it's a pleasure to have you. We are
Likewise.
so pleased to have you on stage here as well, right after Zoe.
Yeah,
So
good to
how
see you
are
again.
you doing social selling?
To be honest, I feel like after Zoe was on here, I can't really hold a candle, but I guess I can take credit for creating the role and hiring her. So, and actually, I can't really even take credit for that either. That was mostly Elle on my team, but we've known for a while that this is a super important channel for us. And when we talked to Zoe, it was just very clear that it was the right fit. So, super happy to have her.
Amazing. And so, James, on your side, was this something new to you when you started, or is this something that really came from Spekit and when you were looking at how to go and up your social game?
Yeah, it's pretty new to me. I've never been super active on any type of social media, LinkedIn included, but LinkedIn is very obviously just a huge opportunity for us at Spekit because we sell to an ideal customer profile that is super active on LinkedIn. So if I was still at Brandfolder, my last company, LinkedIn, maybe we could get something out of it, but not nearly like our target audience just wasn't that active on LinkedIn. And, it kind of just goes back to the fundamentals, like where is your audience? And you can execute the best strategy in the world on a given channel, but if your audience isn't there, it just literally doesn't matter. So for us, we sell to sales enablement people, rev ops, sales leadership, even individual sales reps who are end users. Those are all people who are on LinkedIn all the time. So it was just a very natural next step for us.
Absolutely, it makes sense. I was really curious, like where this started. Was it something you brought with you, or that was one thing I was doing my research. I'm like, okay, where did this come from? Because so many companies, it's such a struggle, right? Because like, where's the attribution? How do you prove that it's working? How do you track it? Well, we'll try it for 30 days, but 30 days isn't enough. So how did this start for you guys?
I think attribution is a blessing and a curse for a lot of B2B SaaS companies. It's both extremely important and extremely flawed in how most people look at it. And I talk about this with a lot of other VPs of marketing and CMOs all the time. But I was talking to Jason, who's the VP of marketing at Metadata, and they also crush it on social selling. And a lot of times attribution gets looked at as like a way to attribute every single deal, like where did it come from? Really, you're looking for macro trends. And at the end of the day, you're looking more for like what's not working that you're trying versus what is. And sometimes you get good, accurate data on what is working, but it's a fallacy to assume that like one touch point is ever responsible for a complex sales cycle deal in B2B SaaS. And we take more of a holistic approach. Like we have invested in Dream Data as our attribution platform. So we're tracking all the touch points and digital channels, but we also have reps ask as the first discovery question, what is your, like, how did you hear about us? Like, what was your first interaction with Spekit? And I read every single opportunity that's created. I read the notes that the AEs enter from that. And I've been meaning to set up an auto sort of like capture through Chorus with that. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But yeah, I mean, we saw success with social before I even joined. I can't take full credit for it. Melanie, our CEO, is pretty well followed and influential in her own right, and she posts a lot of great, engaging content. So like, we always knew something there. The question was, how do you scale it beyond just one person? And Zoe was just a very good fit. Like we talked to her. I don't think we interviewed anyone else for the role. It was just really obvious. Like she has sales experience. She kind of fits our personal brand, and it was just exactly what we were looking for.
That's so cool. And if we stay a little bit more on the measurements of social selling, yeah, there are a lot of touches you can map that are outside social selling. And Zoe has shared one of the tips how you're managing it, but how are you trying to like put it in motion that we know social selling works? How do you know?
I think it's just you hear about it. Like you hear reps or you hear our buyers say, yeah, we came across you we see your stuff on LinkedIn. Like once you hear that stuff a few times, you can extrapolate that there's probably hundreds or thousands of other people that are seeing that, but you're not getting to talk to say that. And brand measurement is like one of the most difficult concepts in marketing. You know, there's a handful of consultancies that pay you pay like 150 grand at the minimum, and they'll go out and survey a bunch of people in your target audience, and maybe you get something that's directionally accurate. No one's really disrupted that space as far as I can tell, but I judge it as like, are we hearing people say, and we're in B2B SaaS, right? Like our average contract value is high enough that we're not a huge volume shop. And so it's very easy to analyze a small number of qualitative data to understand trends and extrapolate from that with fairly directionally accurate results.
And for companies who would like to start this off and, okay, we want to test out if social selling is working, how long time do you think companies should wait to see any results at all?
It's a really good question, and one that I think hinges entirely on if you have someone that has an engaged audience already, because building the audience in the first place is the hardest part, and that takes time. I think I was also fortunate because 2 companies ago, I worked at a influencer marketing platform called Aspire, and basically it was like a CRM for influencer management for B2C brands. But I learned a lot about just sort of the underlying core principles of influencer marketing. And there's a few extremely important lessons. Like one, you go for the people that have the audience you want and that post the type of content that you want. Like I think a huge mistake that a lot of people would probably make is trying to, let's say, limit the authenticity of the people that are posting. It's like the biggest mistake you can make. Like, yeah, I know you've built this very engaged audience in the past, but like now we want you to do this a little bit differently. And, you know, Zoe posts very few things that are related to Spekit, and there is like always in the back of her mind and our mind, like we know that it will push her audience away if she just starts posting about Spekit all the time. So you have to earn the permission of your audience by posting helpful and engaging content that they actually want to see before you can even sprinkle in a little bit of stuff that's relevant to your company itself.
Amazing. And I love that you're talking about the content piece, because that's the one thing that I get asked all the time is it's always funny. They don't monitor emails, they don't listen to calls, but they want to go and validate and like approve all their social messaging. So that's no, it's not realistic. But what would be your advice to the CMOs and the marketers that are like, I want the sellers to post, I want them to be part of this. How do we give them guidance to go and create better content or more aligned content without trying to control everything they do?
Yeah, I think it's tough. It's just a huge paradigm shift for companies. The traditional sort of advice and everything that you've been told as a marketer growing up is like everyone has to have media training if they're speaking about or on behalf of your company. Only three people can talk to the press. Like PR is a whole bag of worms that I'm not going to get into right now. But LinkedIn is the new PR, more or less. Like the engagement and views you can get on LinkedIn is so far beyond what any publication has in B2B SaaS, with like maybe the exception of TechCrunch, and even that's arguable because you're probably not getting your ideal customer profile reading that consistently. Um, and so I think it's really scary to let go of like control over things like that. But it's a catch 22. Like if you try to control what people are saying and you want them to be on message and on brand, like probably isn't going to work out very well. And you'll maybe get, 10 to 15 engagements per post versus you like start to post things authentically and then you start maybe sprinkling in once you've actually built the audience and engagement. So um, I think the call out is like, don't expect everyone to do it right away. It's unrealistic to assume that every single seller is going to want to do this. I would say find the people that you think are naturally interested in doing this and run a pilot with them and like have them start to see some success. And then people like sellers will always follow the one who's most successful. And if they're seeing something that's successful, then you can try and enable all day long. You can try to tell people like, hey, we need you to go do this. But sellers are like cats, right? Like they're going to do what they want when they want because they're very independent. They know what's going to drive business for them most of the time, and they have to manage their time very efficiently. And if you haven't proven to them that this is worthwhile for them, then it's just not going to work. So find the people that are going to naturally gravitate towards it. And then once they start to see some success, you'll naturally, through osmosis, get more people interested.
Wow,
That sounds like your journey,
fantastic.
Laura.
It does. And that's why I was just like smiling. Salespeople are hard to manage and everything's like, no, 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 no. So easy. Just let them do whatever they like. No, but you are so right, James. As soon as you see the value of it, both for the company, but also for yourself as a person, then it's much easier to engage the salespeople. It's like, do this because it will benefit both the company and yourself. You're going to find your voice and everything. But I think the most interesting part that you touched upon, and when we're talking like the enterprise of social, I have been on media trainings, but before I went on media trainings for PR, I felt like, oh, that gang of people that are allowed to talk to press, how come? It's like, I've got so much to share. Then you go into the media training and nothing happens really. So I think it's so fantastic to see companies larger and larger scale like setting their employees free to post on LinkedIn and own that media. And the brand of the company comes out so much more natural. I think it's fantastic. But do you have any tips for like the companies that are on the edge and tip of it for the leadership to actually see the value? Why should we do this? Because, oh, beautiful brand. Like, what if salespeople don't listen?
Yeah, I think this whole idea that you have full control of the brand is kind of a fallacy, especially in today's day and age. Like the amount of channels and the amount of people talking about you, this isn't the 70s anymore where everything is so perfectly curated. The only interactions people are going to have is, you know, maybe TV ads, some print ads, and maybe some direct selling. Now people are going to talk about your brand on social media. They can share reviews. Review platforms have been just completely blown up. There's influencers. There's all these people that have a lot of ability to interact with your brand over channels you don't control. And I think you just have to come to grips with that and use it to your advantage versus viewing it as like a huge threat to how you're able to like perfectly manicure every single thing.
Amazing. It's funny to hear how like the journey starts, and then I think a lot of people assume that it's perfect from the beginning, and that like James had this written out on his wall, step 1, step 2, A through Z, and then like you guys just dive in. But I think one thing I'd like people to know is that you figure it out as you go. You have an idea of what it's going to be, right? But it's not a perfectly manicured thing that it's like, okay, A to Z, here we go, and this is what it's going to be measured, this is how it's going to work. But it does build momentum. It just takes trial and error.
Yeah, I think one other thing I would add, like your question about what would my advice be, if there is someone that has a following, an engaged following in your industry with your buyers already, like figure out a way to work with them. Maybe you sign some sort of contract for them to reshare your content or create some original content for you. Maybe you just hire them. Like, I think there's an interesting example of Salesforce here where Brian Solis, who ran his own advisory firm for a long time, then joined Salesforce as an evangelist. So this is one of the probably the most influential independent analyst that's not part of Gartner, IDC, or Forrester. And they said, let's just pay this guy a bunch of money to work for Salesforce because we know he's so influential in the enterprise. And I think this idea of like the evangelist in B2B SaaS is going to catch on more and more. But it's fully predicated on whether that person already exists, because you don't build that influence overnight. Like, it's definitely a long game. So the huge shortcut here is if you can find someone that already has an engaged following with your audience, like Zoe.
So wrapping out kind of the last little bit here, we're getting a ton of questions that we haven't gone over, and they're going to be a mix of for both of you guys. So I'm going to bring Zoe back in, and we're going to go through the comments. So if anybody has any burning questions, now is the time. Go and get in the comments here, and this is your chance to ask your question. Oh, let's not do that.
She's back.
That's better.
I'm back. Hey, James.
Could you hear everything I was saying, or hopefully it was muted?
Oh, no, I was definitely listening. I was like, oh. No, it's great.
What do you guys think? Greg had a question. I hear this quite a bit too. Do you see challenges with different generations on how this rolls out?
I think it's a propensity thing more than a hard rule. Like, will younger generations probably be more likely to adapt this easier just because they have, from a younger age, probably like built a lot of neurons around engaging with social media. But I don't think that means that, previous generations won't do it. I think it's just like, are they most likely to? Probably not.
I think I would go back to like what James said when I was offline about kind of like what's in it for them. Like, people have to believe that there's something in it for them. Sellers are not going to adopt a methodology that they're like, this isn't going to like get me to my number. Why would I waste time on this? So it's really just like being able to convince somebody of the value, what's in it for me. And I think that doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, what you look like if there's something in it for you, you're going to be inherently motivated to try versus if you don't believe something will work for you.
Love it. And it actually ties into this other question by Patrick here. And he's saying, my company isn't great at posting anything, and I'm curious at how to get my connections to follow my content without it looking like pitching my product in the post. It's like the most common thing that you see people that get on to, like, oh, I'm going to do some social selling. And it's like, no, social selling is not selling on social. So Zoe, what are some of the cardinal sins of not selling on social?
So I would say two things. I used to believe that I coined this term. I was recently corrected. Apparently it was Sam McKenna beat me to it by like 6 months. So shout out Sam McKenna. No pitch slapping. That's like rule number one. You don't connect with somebody and immediately hit them with a pitch. But I think the thing that I tell anyone who comes to me and is like, how do I social sell? The conversations in private are earned by the engagement in public. So if you can go onto your prospects' content and they're talking about problems or they're offering their expertise, you should be in there liking, engaging, offering an insight, asking a question so that they're seeing your name and you're establishing that familiarity. And that way, in 2 weeks, when they raise their hand and they're like, oh my gosh, like, so like this problem we're facing these days, like this is the solution we have, but it's not great. Anybody have any advice? You have now earned the right to hop into their DMs and say, hey, James, like you talked about how your reps are having a really hard time finding the information that they need when and where they need it. Like, we help teams like yours solve that problem every single day, wondering if you have just 5 minutes to chat about how we're doing that. Something like very low lift, very low ask, but you've now got that familiarity. They know and understand your name. You've been engaging on their content and maybe other people's content in their sphere. So you've established like a shred of authority, or like you might know what you're talking about. And then you've now earned the right to ask them privately, like, hey, would you have 5 minutes to talk on the phone if I'm able to offer you additional value? So that's the way that I would go about it. I wouldn't start by saying like Spekit is the best tool ever. Everybody should buy it. DM me if you want a demo. Like, that's not going to do anything for you. And to James's point, like, you have to kind of earn the right to sprinkle in that content. So it takes some time to build that up.
I have a question, Nick, before, James, go on and I'll follow up with the question.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. I almost think you're 100% shooting yourself in the foot if you send anything self-promotional or make any sort of action within like 10 days of making a connection request. I think the goal of making a connection request is not to like not waste your emails on being able to slide into people's DMs. It's how can I increase the likelihood that when I post something in my feed that they will then see it. And if you think about this at scale, if you add all of the people in your TAM or in your, if you're a sales rep, like if you add everyone in your territory, you can manufacture some pull by just adding all of them. And hopefully you're doing like something pretty inobtrusive, but just saying like, okay, I'm going to connect with them and then I'm just going to post. And like over time, if I'm posting helpful stuff, they will see it. And that's free access to, you know, mind share, especially when every channel is so saturated right now and email spam filtering is getting better. You know, there's things like gated that make it a little bit harder to get into people's inbox. Like all these things make the ability to get your post in front of people even more important than before. But you don't do it by like pitch slapping or whatever you want to call it.
I absolutely love it. And Nick, it also ties to what you always talk about on your content, kind of not just pitch slapping on the DMs, but also pitch slapping on the comments. Like, keep your hands like to yourself. Wait, they'll come. But then there's a question. So you've been an SDR. Look, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, okay, you engaged your sales team to start posting. They started engaging, they started connecting, doing all the right things. But let's say it's only half of the team that is doing it. It's pretty easy for us to manage it at Dream Data. We're 3 salespersons, but at Spekit, you're much larger. So how do you make sure that the SDRs, the AEs, whoever it is that are doing it, are actually getting credit for that as well? Because they're measured on revenue. They're not measured on DMs and pitches.
Yeah, I think it's pretty complicated. I don't think there's like a super simple answer to be like, and this is the formula, how you do it. Because at the end of the day, people's personal brands are personal and you can't force someone to post on social. Like I don't know any companies that have it written in their contract that you are required to post XYZ times on LinkedIn. Like that would be pretty crazy. So it's definitely like a choice. I think it comes with leading from that, what's in it for me, providing that value to them of why it's going to benefit them. And then like encouraging them to track those wins. Because back when I was an SDR, it behooved me to know which channels were my strongest channels so I could double down and spend more time there. When I figured out that I was booking more meetings on social than I was booking on cold calls, I continued to do my cold calls, but then I increased the amount of time I spent on social, and lo and behold, I booked even more meetings. So I think it's like encouraging SDRs to own and know their own numbers and understand which channels are working for them, because we have an SDR that crushes it on the phones and he books most of his meetings on the phones. And we have an SDR who crushes it in the LinkedIn DMs and books most of her meetings in the LinkedIn DMs. I would not want Morgan to then go spend 100% of her day on the phones if she is having a ton of success on LinkedIn. And I wouldn't want Jeff to spend all day on LinkedIn if he's doing really well on the phone. So I think it's like a personal thing. Find your sweet spot and spend more time doing that, but also not neglecting other channels, because it's always multi-touch. It's always going to be like, I got a voicemail from you and I saw you on LinkedIn and I read your email, and now on the 8th touch, I'm going to finally respond to you. It's never just like, oh, you sent me 18 LinkedIn DMs and now I'm going to reply. So it's like having that balance, encouraging people with the what's in it for me. And like, it's interesting. LinkedIn just released some new analytics where you can see the impressions from your profile and the engagements. I just looked at mine for the last 365 days and it kind of blew my mind. But that would be something I would encourage reps to do. Just like take a look at the reach that you actually have. You may not even realize how much reach you have from your LinkedIn. And those are eyeballs seeing your name, seeing your company, and it's going to make that familiarity a little bit easier when you do reach out and raise your hand and say, hey, I think I can help you with this problem that you have.
I think we have time for one more. And I actually want to grab this one because I get this all the time where people are saying, you know, I would love to do social selling, but social selling is only for salespeople and marketers. And, you know, that's all the people that are on LinkedIn. So I'm curious, what is your view on this? Is social selling just for sales and marketing?
I don't think it's just for sales or marketing. I think you have potentially a higher likelihood of reaching them in sales and marketing. But some industries and some personas, like John's question, like, do you see it as less effective for certain personas? I think it's kind of the same question. Ultimately, you can't force people to be on a channel, and do the work to figure out if your audience is active on a channel before you start to invest a bunch of money into trying to make it work. And sometimes it's more obvious than not. Like for us, I didn't go do a bunch of qualitative research interviews and surveys to figure out if salespeople and sales leadership and like enablement is on LinkedIn. In a lot of other personas or a lot of other industries, I probably would double check, because like you can probably save yourself a bunch of time trying to make a channel work if they're just not on it.
I would also say there's like other social channels that people are on. Like if you're in, I don't know, selling into like crypto, those people are on Twitter all day. If you are selling to developers, they're on Discord. Like there are other social channels, and my philosophy is be where your ICP is. For us, it happens to be on LinkedIn, so it works out that we spend a lot of time there. But if our ICP was on Discord, that's where I'd be all day long. So it's just kind of, you have to think about where are they spending their time, and then go spend your time there too.
I just realized something. They're like, LinkedIn's obviously big for us, but Slack communities are too. And Slack communities are just the business AOL chat rooms of like the 90s.
So true.
I mean, I wasn't on AOL in the 90s because I was 3, but like I believe that was what it was.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reddit, like you just gotta go look at your channel, go take a quick look. If you're not sure, like James had talked about, like go do an interview. Ask them where they get their information. Ask them where they hang out. I don't know anybody that's not listening to podcasts. Like, just take the time to do a little bit of research if you're not sure and before diving in. But thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all your great advice, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to do this every once a month. We're going to go and dive into social selling. And Zoe, James, where can people find you? How can they follow you?
No, you must.
Everyone already follows Zoe, so I'm pretty much just active on LinkedIn. So feel free to shoot me a connection. Always happy to connect to other sales and marketing folks. But thank you guys for having us.
Petition to have James start a marketing Twitter. I think he would be great on marketing Twitter. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. It was fantastic having you.
Thank you, everyone. Make sure you go follow Zoe and James, and we'll catch everybody soon. If you have any more questions, throw them in the comments. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
See
Bye,
ya.
guys.